Hello horror hounds, welcome back to my A to Z of horror, and we are at I. Now before George Romero came along and changed the game forever, the word zombie would conjure up images of Caribbean islands, voodoo ceremonies and persistent drumming off in the distance. And I decided to use this A to Z of horror as a chance to watch one of the OZ, that's original zombie movies, that I'd never seen before. So for this instalment of A to Z, I is for I Walked with a Zombie. My A to Z of horror series owes a debt to Jambo Shango and Randy Mole's own A to Z of horror. So in my description field below, I will link to their instalment for I, where they talk about I Saw the Devil. But for us, I Walked with a Zombie is the second horror film produced by Val Lewton for RKO Pictures. It was directed by Jacques Tourneur, written by Ardal Ray and Kurt Siodmak. Essentially, these people have got form. The film was based on an article about voodoo practices that was published in American Weekly magazine, but Lewton always craved atmosphere, character and narrative, so he asked his writers to weave their voodoo research into a story modelled on Charlotte Bronte's Gothic-infused Jane Eyre. The film follows Betsy Connell, a Canadian nurse who travels to a sugar plantation on the fictional Caribbean island of Saint Sebastian to care for the wife of the plantation owner, Paul Holland. Her patient, Jessica Holland, has been rendered catatonic by a mysterious fever. But that's not what everyone on the island believes. The result is a darkly dreamlike, noir-tinged sleepwalk into a spider's web of familial secrets and guilt, where the zombie of voodoo folklore signifies the exploitation and dehumanization of the body through labor, slavery, and indeed marriage. It's a film that ambiguously begs the question, how many zombies are in this movie? Are there one, two, perhaps none? Jessica Holland, the patient, is the first of two possible human zombies that the film offers for our consideration. The other is the striking, tall, lanky, bug-eyed figure of Carrefour, played by Darby Jones, who I've used as the thumbnail picture for this video. Betsy tries her best to use her medical training to revive Jessica, to no avail. When she hears that an island priestess has been successful in similar cases, she turns from science to the predominant faith of the island for possible cures: voodoo. But the script walks such a beautifully delicate line of ambiguity that the true zombie may indeed be the island's own colonial history of slavery. The sins of the past are never too far away from the present, be it the artifacts of the Holland family's colonial slave-owning past or the details of the family's recent past recorded in song through a kind of island oral tradition. What's beautiful about this film is that all of these themes are very clearly in the mix. I Walked with a Zombie, however, avoids any real racial attitude or representation from the time. This was released in 1943 that might be toe-curlingly antiquated today. This is principally because all the characters, black and white, are treated with respect and dignity. So yes, all the black characters are, as perhaps you'd expect from the setting of the film, part of the servant or worker classes. And yes, some of the white characters are clearly ambivalent or dismissive of them and their beliefs, but the film isn't. Whilst RKO Pictures were clearly interested in the success that Universal Pictures had had with their horror movies and wanted a piece of that coin, and who can blame them, the man they put in charge, auteur-producer Val Lewton, seems more interested in the horrors and evils that we are all capable of than the invasion of the supernatural into the normal world. So in I Walked with a Zombie, the possible supernatural implications of the island's religion is used as a lever to pry open and interrogate some very real world concerns. Behind the beautiful appearance of a sun-soaked island paradise is a darkness and moral decay that could swallow anyone at any time. The film is front-loaded with this notion of real-life horror lying just below the surface of seeming beauty. On the boat passage to Saint Sebastian, plantation owner Paul Holland says to Betsy, the nurse coming there, "It's not beautiful," and she thinks that he's read her mind as she looks out across the approaching island, the water, the starscape, and he says, "It's easy enough to read the thoughts of a newcomer. Everything seems beautiful because you don't understand. Those flying fish, they're not leaping for joy, they're jumping for terror. Bigger fish want to eat them. That luminous water, it takes its gleam from millions of dead bodies. There's only death and decay here." Even after that warning, once she's arrived on Saint Sebastian, the black driver who brings Betsy to Fort Holland tells her that the figure of Saint Sebastian displayed in the garden at Fort Holland is the figurehead of a slave ship, which he describes as the enormous boat that brought the long ago fathers and the long ago mothers of us all, chained to the bottom of that boat. Betsy, oblivious to the horror of history being described, remarks, "They brought you to a beautiful place, didn't they?" And his reply, "If you say, miss, if you say." And that figurehead that's mentioned is an astounding piece of art design, a figurehead statue that the locals called Tea Misery, which sits as a silent rebuke against the horrors of the island's past. It sits on the ground of the plantation owner's estate, a black man bound and with arrows in him in the classical representation of Saint Sebastian's martyrdom. It's at once striking and depressingly part of the furniture for everyone who lives on the island. But one of the themes of this movie that is astounding to modernize is how deftly and adeptly these ideas of such a horrific past is active and hurts the present generations. It's not just a case of the sins of the fathers are visited upon the sons, but that our shared past is part of our present, active and alive. Instead of true horror, what this film has to offer is atmosphere by the bucketful. It's mainly a mood piece that establishes an uncanny eeriness in the film which lingers until the very last moments through noir shadows, suggestive camera movements, capturing an ugly, haunting colonial history without putting too fine a point on it. The film doesn't take a sledgehammer to crack a nut. It just lays these aspects out and lets you absorb them as you will. The lightness of touch results in an ambiguous story where we're left to make up our own minds. Many characters, through personal guilt, present themselves as the villain of the piece, but it may just as plausibly be that there are no true villains in I Walked with a Zombie. Just a cast of characters trying their best and often failing with the situation that they find themselves in. I love the ambiguity in I Walked with a Zombie. Is Jessica suffering from a tropical fever, or has she been affected by voodoo? For her own personal sins, has she been turned into a zombie? She exists in a weird or uncanny state of quantum indeterminacy, like Schrodinger's cat, simultaneously dead and alive, with various characters arguing over how her state should eventually be collapsed. Ill, cursed. The film sits between rationalism and superstition, Christianity and voodoo, magic and medicine, science and faith. What I love about this film is that the voodoo is not inherently evil. Some people use it to try to do good, others for their own selfish ends. I Walked with a Zombie is not going to be to everyone's tastes. The movies that Val Lewton produced in the horror mould for RKO had 3 stipulations. They had to be under a certain amount, they had to be under 75 minutes, and RKO had to insist on the title. That's why the title of this is particularly lurid. It's damn near perfect in my eyes. It's not quite perfect. One of those stipulations, the runtime, does mean that Paul and Betsy's relationship is undeniably rushed and undercooked. And this film might be too slow or too short on horror for some modern viewers. Others may be put off by the lack of a definitive answer as to what has transpired. I think that's one of the strengths of the movie. However, if you're a fan of the classic Universal monster movies and want a way to spend more time in that creepy land of imagination, drenched in chills rather than outright fear, you could do a lot worse than book a short stay at Saint Sebastian. I saw I Walked with a Zombie for the first time last week, specifically for this A to Z of horror, and I'm already looking forward to making a return trip. I've also picked up a couple of other Val Lewton produced RKO Pictures, Cat People and Curse of the Cat People, and I can't wait to dip into more, along with the body snatchers that comes with this set. My next instalment for the A to Z of horror was another chance to get round to watching a movie that had been sat on my shelf for a while that I'd never seen before. However, Where I Walked with a Zombie literally bewitched me. The entry for J left me very ambivalent. The J can stand for the name of the movie as well as its notorious director. And maybe some of you out there can help me better appreciate a film that I struggled with when we reveal next time. The J is for